Hi, third graders. It is time for Detectives in Togas Chapter 7. You'll, of course, need your book, something to write with, your sticky note thinking sheet, so as we're reading, you can jot down thoughts that come to mind. And then also, I emailed your parents a Detectives in Togas vocab list that goes with the chapter that we're reading. So I plan to do one of these for every chapter because there are just a lot of vocabulary words in here of things that we don't use every day in our life, but it teaches us a lot about Roman culture. So for chapter 7, the newspaper, if you look over the vocab list before you start reading, word number 1 is tussle. A short fight or struggle, an argument or dispute is a tussle. Reproved, which reprove was one of our spelling words that we did on the test just on Friday for list 23, is to criticize or correct someone, usually in a gentle way. Hieroglyphs, most of you know this because you did hieroglyphs on your cartouche in art with Mrs. Robinson, and then those of you who are here in 2nd grade and studied Egypt with Mrs. Grubbs did a lot of study with hieroglyphs as well, but they're little pictures, symbols and characters that look like a picture. Forum is a large public place in an ancient Roman city that was used as a center of business. The orator is a person who makes speeches. A prefect is a chief officer or government official responsible for a particular area. Crestfallen means to be very sad or disappointed. Preside is to be in charge of something. A patrician is a person who's a member of the highest social class, so they're looked up to and respected in society. And impious is a feeling or showing a lack of respect for God. And hooligan is a usually young man, a young person who does noisy and violent things as part of a group or gang. So it could be helpful just to read through those before we start reading. And then even though we don't get to read together in person, I thought for those of you who want to, we can read it together on video. If you would rather just read it yourself or read with your parents, the video is completely optional, but it's kind of fun to read together, and then I can show you just some examples of using sticky note thinking. Yours probably won't be the same as mine, but it kind of gives you just a picture. So make sure you have all those things and then get yourself in a comfy, cozy spot for reading, and we will read chapter 7, the newspaper, together. Now remember, we're picking up right after the boys were just getting ready to leave Xanthippus's, and they noticed under the wardrobe something gold and shiny, which was a gold chain and a disc that had hieroglyphs on it. Chapter 7, the newspaper. I remember now how it happened, Xanthippus continued. I tried to grip the burglar by the throat, but instead my hands closed on something metallic which came loose. That must have been the chain. Probably it was kicked under the wardrobe in our tussle. You know what tussle means because of your vocab list, right? So in their fight, their brawl, their struggle. He examined the chain more closely. This is a type of chain which goes on the collar of a rain cloak as a sort of clasp. Look here. The disc was sewed onto the collar. A few threads of wool are still clinging to the holes. There was probably a second disc with an eye for the hook. When I tugged at the chain, the hook was bent straight and slipped out of the eye. The chain is very beautifully worked, by the way. What are those funny pictures? Antonius asked, rubbing his finger over the gold disc. Your hands need washing, Xanthippus reproved him. Those marks engraved on the disc are hieroglyphs, Egyptian picture writing. Now all we need to do is find the owner of the chain and we'll have the burglar, Mucius said hopefully. Ridiculous, Xanthippus said. Rome has a population of 500,000. A fine chance you have of finding the one cloak this chain belongs to. No, it's not much of a clue. Here, keep the chain. It's yours. Delighted, Mucius thanked his teacher and dropped the chain into his pocket. The servant came in with a stack of damp cloths to apply to Xanthippus's sore leg, and the boys were sent away. As they crossed the forum, they passed by the great sundial, back of the orator's platform, and saw that the 3rd hour of the day had already begun. In Roman times, the hour of the day starts in the morning. 7 a.m. is the 1st hour, 8 a.m. is the 2nd hour. So right now, the 3rd hour of the day would be 9 a.m. So it would be, the 3rd hour of the day had already begun. It would be just a little after 9 in the morning. We ought to hurry, Julius said. Rufus must be terribly anxious for us to get back. Rufus can wait, Mucius said. We must see Vinicius first. Why Vinicius? The others asked in surprise. To keep him from going to the prefect, Mucius explained. We'll tell him that somebody forged Rufus's handwriting. Now remember, the prefect is a government official in charge of a certain area. So Mucius thinks they need to go and talk to Vinicius before he goes to the prefect and has them arrest Rufus. But he knows Rufus's friends, and so he won't believe us, Publius objected. Now we're headed right to the very top of page 71, if you'll ask where we are. This remark had a dampening effect on the boy's spirits. Eustace murmured, I never thought of that. How about this, Julius proposed. We will take the writing tablet on which Rufus wrote for us this morning and have my father look it over and compare it with the writing on the temple. Since my father's a judge, he'll be able to tell right off that the writing was forged, and he can write a letter about it to Vinicius. How long will that take? Mucius asked. A couple of days, Julius said with a crestfallen air. That long? Mucius exclaimed. My father's in Pompeii right now, Julius explained. He had to go down and preside over a gladiatorial show he sponsored. So preside means he's overseeing it, and the gladiators, remember, were people who were trained in Rome for fighting, for either fighting other men or animals. And so they were usually big and strong and fierce. And so he was going to preside over this, which was done for sport, for people to watch as entertainment, these gladiators fighting. So since he's gone, it's going to take a while. We cannot wait that long, Mucius said. Vinicius was once a judge himself, Flavius said. Perhaps he can compare the handwritings. A fine idea, Mucius approved, and Flavius grinned proudly. Publius was sent off to obtain the writing tablet from Rufus, after which he would meet the others in front of Vinicius's house. Publius was the fastest runner among the boys. He had long, skinny legs and always came out first in races. Pleased with his assignment, he shot off like an arrow. In the meanwhile, the Forum, empty a few hours ago, had become a bustling place, swarming with people who poured in from all the side streets. From the noise and buzz of talk, it might have been a chariot race at the Circus Maximus. Everywhere there were groups of citizens discussing the affairs of the day, their togas billowing in the breeze. An especially large crowd stood in front of a massive building which housed the National Archives. Curious, the boys forced their way boldly to the front of this crowd, but they were disappointed. There was nothing to see except the daily newspaper, which had just been hung out by two of the censor's officials. The latest news had been written on it in neat handwriting, and the people were pressing forward eagerly to read. In the front row of the crowd stood several well-dressed slaves, the copyists of rich patricians who copied the news on wax tablets with astonishing speed. Back at home, their masters waited impatiently for the transcribed bulletins. So the job of the slaves, of these patricians, those were the wealthy or looked highly upon members of the society, they would take their wax tablets, they'd go copy down the news from the newspaper, and then run it back home to their masters. So they didn't have printing presses. That's how they relayed the news. So the boys came out just as the newspaper had been posted. Antonius, Flavius, and Julius wanted to go on. They'd been hoping for something more sensational than the dull, old newspaper. But Mucius did not move and stared in fascination at the news. There's something about the Temple of Minerva here, he whispered to the others. Where? Flavius asked. Not so loud, Mucius shushed him. There, down near the middle. The writing was small, and it took Antonius, Julius, and Flavius a moment before they discovered the item. Then, with growing alarm, they read, Last night, the Temple of Minerva on the Esquiline, erected in honor of our emperor, was desecrated by the impudent hand of a shameless boy. Smeared with red paint on the eastern wall of the temple are the words, Caius is a dumbbell. This impious act will certainly arouse the indignation of all right-minded citizens of Rome. It is high time that the authorities took energetic measures to combat such delinquency among our modern youth. The temple faces the home of his honor, Senator Vinicius. In all likelihood, the insult is directed against the senator's son, Caius. Young Vinicius is a pupil at the well-known Xanthos school. It seems evident that the guilty boy would be one of his fellow pupils with whom Caius must have quarreled. We hope that the senator will promptly question his son in order to discover the culprit and turn him over to the police at once. Public opinion will not rest until this young hooligan is behind bars, a respecter of the emperor. And that is where we conclude chapter 7. So we want to jot down some of our thoughts that we had as we're reading chapter 7. Do you have thoughts about who the Egyptian gold disc that had, or the gold disc that had Egyptian hieroglyphs on it, who that might have belonged to? Do you have thoughts about what the boys are going to do now that they see this posted in the newspaper? What are your predictions? What are you thinking? If you were one of the boys, how would you be feeling? I think I would probably be afraid for my friends, so I might jot down, here while I was reading on page 72 in this chapter. So I'd write on 72, I'm feeling really afraid for Rufus. And I would just write in a complete sentence, but I could just write, I'm feeling afraid for Rufus. And I would write it in my box and just write the page number. And that's all I have to do. Just write it on there. Now I might have a question. What are the boys going to do now? That could be my question on page 74. Right? What are the boys going to do now? Question mark. Or I can make some predictions that they're going to hurry to Vinicius's house, or they're going to come up with a new plan because the news is already out. So go ahead and just jot down a thing or two. Again, by the time you finish chapter 7 and chapter 8, you should have 4 on this page. So it could be good to go ahead and just jot down 2 for chapter 7 before you move on to chapter 8.